I still remember the day my parents crushed my dreams. I was 23, fresh out of business school with top grades, excited to join our family's restaurant business. Megan Mullally Neighborhood Grill was my grandfather's legacy. He started with one small diner and turned it into a successful chain of 51 restaurants across 3 states. I had worked in those restaurants since I was 15, doing every job from washing dishes to managing a store. I thought the dinner that night was to welcome me into the company. But then Dad said, "The business is going to your sister." I froze. "Carol has the right mindset for success," Dad added. I looked down at my plate, suddenly not hungry. Across the table, my sister Carol smirked. She was 26, had never worked in the restaurants, and spent most of her time shopping and posting online about being a future CEO. "But Dad," I said, my voice shaking, "I've worked in the restaurants for years. I have a business degree. I know how everything works." "That's enough, Ashley," Mom cut in, tapping her designer bracelet against her wine glass. "Your sister is a natural leader. You're just 2. She stopped and exchanged a glance with Dad. "To what?" I asked, my heart pounding. "Too simple for this kind of responsibility," she finally said. I felt like I had been slapped. Carol sighed, studying her manicured nails.
"Let's be honest, Ashley.
"You're the type who's happy serving tables. There's nothing wrong with that. Someone has to do it." I turned to Grandpa Eric, hoping he would speak up. He had always been my biggest supporter, teaching me about business as we worked together in his first diner. But he said nothing. He just sat there, quietly cutting his steak, his face unreadable. "It's decided," Dad announced. "Carol will take over as CEO next month. You can stay as the floor manager at the downtown location if you want." That night, I cried myself to sleep in my small apartment. All my dreams, all my hard work, thrown away. I wasn't flashy enough. I didn't fit their idea of success. The next morning, I went to work like always, holding my head high even though the staff gave me pitying looks. They had all heard the news. Months passed. Carol's idea of leadership mostly meant taking long lunches with friends and posting motivational quotes on the company's social media. I stayed quiet as she made bad decisions, ignoring advice from experienced managers. Dad supported her no matter what, even when profits started dropping. Then I met Nicholas. He walked into my restaurant one afternoon looking for lunch and ended up staying for 4 hours, completely fascinated as I talked about how restaurants work. He was different from anyone I had ever met. Smart, kind, and truly interested in my ideas. A successful tech entrepreneur, he saw value in my simple way of running a business. Our whirlwind romance became the best part of my life. Within a year, we were planning our wedding. My family's reaction was exactly what I expected, cold and dismissive. "At least she found someone," Mom said when we announced our engagement. "Maybe now she'll stop working altogether." "Not likely," Carol laughed. "Ashley loves being a servant." Nicholas squeezed my hand under the table. His touch said what words couldn't. "They don't see your worth, but I do." We planned a small wedding, nothing like the over-the-top event Carol had thrown the year before when she married a politician's son. My parents gave just enough money so they wouldn't look bad in front of their rich friends. The morning of my wedding was bright and clear. I was in the bridal suite when a courier arrived with a letter. The envelope was thick, expensive paper. On the front, written in familiar handwriting, were the words, "To be delivered to Ashley Graham on her wedding day." My hands shook as I opened it. It was from Grandpa Eric. He had passed away 4 months ago, shortly after Carol took over as CEO. His death was sudden, a heart attack in his sleep. The family had been shocked when they found no will, just instructions that all his assets would be handled by his lawyers. I took a deep breath and started reading. "My dearest Ashley, if you're reading this, 2 things have happened. By the time you read this, I will no longer be here. And today, you are marrying the man you love. I wish more than anything that I could be there to walk you down the aisle, to see you in your beautiful dress, and to tell you in person how proud I am of you. But since I can't, I hope this letter will be my final gift to you." Tears blurred my vision as I continued reading. My hands trembled, my heart pounding with every word. "I have watched you be underestimated your entire life. Your parents and sister never saw your true worth. They mistook your kindness for weakness, your attention to detail for simplicity, and your hard work for servitude. But I saw something completely different. I saw myself in you. The same fire, the same determination, the same understanding of what makes a business truly successful. It's not about power or money. It's about people. It's about caring for your employees, your customers, and the heart of the company. And what your parents and sister don't know, Ashley, is that they never truly had control over Megan Mullally Neighborhood Grill. My breath caught in my throat. I gripped the letter tighter, my hands shaking. I never transferred ownership to your father. He thought he owned everything. He thought he was in charge. But in reality, he was only ever managing the operations. I was still the true owner. I controlled everything through a holding company called Big Bear Motorsports and Equipment. My mind raced. Big Bear Motorsports and Equipment. I had seen that name before. On company paperwork, in legal documents, in small mentions over the years. But I had never thought much about it. Today, on your wedding day, ownership of Big Bear Motorsports and Equipment transfers to you. A gasp escaped my lips. I could hardly breathe. Ashley, you are now the majority owner of Megan Mullally Neighborhood Grill. The lawyers have already finalized the paperwork. As of today, your father, mother, and sister are no longer in charge. They were never truly owners. They were employees. And now they work for you. I had to sit down. My wedding dress rustled around me as I lowered myself onto the chair, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. There was more. I never wanted to see them crush your spirit, but I needed to be sure you were ready. I needed you to understand every part of the business, from washing dishes to running a full restaurant. I needed you to learn humility, to work harder than anyone else, to prove to yourself, not just to them, that you deserved this. Most importantly, I needed you to find someone who valued you for who you are, not for what they could gain from you. Now it's time to show them what true leadership looks like, Ashley. Show them what you've always been capable of. And remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about rising above. With all my love, Grandpa Eric. P.S. There's a board meeting scheduled for Friday morning. Don't be late, CEO. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. I looked down and saw an email from Grandpa's lawyers. My fingers shook as I opened it. It was all real. Attached were the official documents confirming my ownership, the meeting agenda for Friday, and, shockingly, evidence of Carol's mismanagement over the past months. A loud knock on the door made me jump. Ashley, are you ready? It was Nicholas. Something's going on outside. Your family is making a scene. From inside the bridal suite, I could hear raised voices coming from the garden, the very place where my wedding ceremony was supposed to happen. My family was arguing, their voices sharp and urgent. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and reached for the door handle. No more feeling small. No more doubting myself. As soon as I stepped out, Nicholas looked at me. His sharp eyes scanned my face, instantly noticing that something had changed. Everything okay? He asked softly. Without a word, I handed him Grandpa Eric's letter. His expression shifted as he read, his brows raising in surprise. Then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. Well, he said, looking amused. This explains why your father is out there yelling about an emergency board meeting notification he just received. I exhaled, feeling stronger than I had in years. I reached for Nicholas's hand, gripping it tightly. Shall we handle this before our wedding? I asked. He chuckled and kissed my forehead. Lead the way, CEO. As we walked toward the garden, Carol's high-pitched voice rang out. This has to be a mistake. I'm the CEO. I run this company. I stepped onto the garden path, the morning sun catching the white fabric of my wedding dress. The guests, already seated for the ceremony, turned their heads toward the commotion. The entire scene had fallen silent, except for my family. Dad stood there, his face red with anger, gripping his phone so tightly his knuckles were white. Mom kept smoothing her expensive dress, her nervous habit whenever she was uncomfortable. And Carol, she stood slightly apart, her perfectly made-up face twisted in disbelief. Her gaze locked onto me, and her voice rose into a sharp, demanding tone. "What is going on?" she snapped. "Why are we getting emails about an emergency board meeting?" And her voice suddenly cracked into a shriek. "Why does it list you as CEO?" I looked at them, really looked at them. The people who had spent years making me feel small, as if I were nothing more than an employee in the company I had worked so hard to understand and improve. But now I didn't feel small at all. I raised Grandpa's letter and held it in plain view. "Because that's exactly what I am," I said, my voice calm but strong. "Would you like to read what Grandpa Eric had to say?" Dad snatched the letter from my hands, his eyes scanning the words quickly. Mom and Carol leaned over his shoulder, their faces growing paler with every line they read. The wedding guests sat in stunned silence, watching the drama unfold. Dad's hand trembled as he gripped the paper. His lips parted, but no words came out at first. Finally, he whispered, This is impossible." But I could see it in his eyes. He knew it was real. He knew that all this time, Big Bear Motorsports and Equipment had controlled everything. And now it was mine. All this time, they thought they were in charge. But they were just employees. And now, they worked for me. I took a deep breath and looked my father in the eye. "I've confirmed everything. You were never the owner, Dad. You were just an employee, a manager, just like me." Carol let out a furious gasp before lunging toward me, jabbing a manicured finger at my chest. "You planned this," she accused, her voice shaking with rage. "You tricked Grandpa somehow. There's no way he would have done this." Before I could respond, Nicholas stepped in, his voice calm but commanding. "Carol," he said, his sharp gaze locking onto her. "Your grandfather was one of the smartest businessmen in 3 states. Are you saying he was easily fooled? Or are you suggesting that he didn't know exactly what he was doing?" Carol's mouth opened, but no words came out. She wasn't used to being challenged, and Nicholas's logic left her with no argument. Still, her eyes blazed with fury, her body trembling with frustration. I straightened my shoulders, standing taller than I ever had in front of my family. "The board meeting is scheduled for Friday at 8 a.m., I announced, my voice steady and strong. "I expect everyone to be there." Then, turning to the guests, I let a slow, confident smile spread across my face. "But right now, I have a wedding to attend." Carol's face twisted with disbelief. "You can't do this to me," she suddenly shrieked. "I'm the CEO. I have contracts. I have commitments." I met her glare with complete calm. "All of which will be reviewed on Friday," I said smoothly. "Now, you can either stay for the wedding as my family, or you can leave. It's your choice." They left, of course. Mom paused just long enough to throw one last parting shot over her shoulder. "You'll regret this, Ashley. You're not ready for this responsibility." I watched them walk away, expecting to feel hurt. But instead, I felt something else entirely.
Peace.
Nicholas squeezed my hand, and together, we walked down the aisle. The wedding was smaller than planned, but somehow, it felt more perfect. For all the chaos and drama, our guests couldn't stop whispering about what they had just witnessed. And I couldn't stop smiling. Friday morning. The sun was bright as I stepped into Megan Mullally Neighborhood Grill headquarters. I wasn't wearing designer labels like Carol always did. No expensive heels, no flashy jewelry. Just a professional, practical outfit, the kind I had always worn as a manager. As I approached the executive elevator, the security guard, who had seen me countless times before, did a double take. Then, realizing who I now was, he scrambled to open the door for me. I walked in, head held high. When I stepped into the boardroom at exactly 8 a.m., it was already full. Dad sat in the CEO's chair, as if nothing had changed. Carol sat beside him, arms crossed, her expression cold and distant. They were both pretending that the weekend hadn't happened. The board members, mostly Grandpa's old friends, watched me with quiet interest. They had known me since I was a child, had seen me working in the restaurants for years. Now they were waiting to see what I would do. I stepped forward, my voice calm and unwavering. "You're in my seat, Dad."
He stiffened.
"Ashley, be reasonable." Before he could finish, Mr. Nathan, Grandpa's oldest friend and a respected board member, stood up. He turned to my father, his voice firm and unwavering. "Jerry," he said, "it's time to step aside." Mr. Nathan, Grandpa Eric's oldest friend, cleared his throat and stood. His voice carried the weight of experience and authority. "I believe you'll find that your daughter is correct," he said, looking directly at my father. "We've all reviewed the documentation. Big Bear Motorsports and Equipment has always held the majority ownership of Megan Mullally Neighborhood Grill. And as of Monday, Ashley is its sole owner." He paused, letting the words settle before adding, "She's our CEO now." Silence filled the room. My father's face darkened, his hands clenching into fists on the table. Carol let out a loud scoff, shaking her head in disbelief. The next hour passed in a blur of legal paperwork and signatures. Carol didn't last long. Halfway through the process, when it became clear that she no longer had any power, she shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is a joke," she spat. "You can't do this." I met her furious glare with complete calm. "Actually, I already have." Then, in front of everyone, I rescinded her executive access, revoked her company credit card, and removed her from the payroll. Her face turned red with rage. Without another word, she stormed out, her heels clicking angrily against the tile floor. Dad stayed. He sat through every document, his face growing grimmer with each one, as he realized just how completely he had misunderstood his position in the company. He had never been the owner. He had only been a manager. When the last signature was in place, I set my pen down and looked around the room. "Now," I said, standing tall, "let's talk about the company's performance over the past few months." I pulled up a presentation I had been working on for weeks. The numbers didn't lie. Profits were down. Customer complaints had skyrocketed. 10% of our regular customers had stopped coming. Employee turnover had increased by 50%. 3 of our most profitable locations were now operating at a loss. The board members shifted uncomfortably, nodding grimly. They had suspected things were bad, but Carol had kept them in the dark. "Here's my plan to fix it," I said, clicking to the next slide. I had been preparing for this moment for years. "We're going back to basics: quality food, excellent service, and taking care of our people. Every executive, including me, will spend 1 week per quarter working in our restaurants. Grandpa's employee education program will be reinstated and expanded." As I spoke, I saw the board members sit up straighter, their expressions shifting. Some even smiled. They weren't just listening, they were believing. Even Dad looked surprised. Maybe for the first time, he was realizing how much I had learned over the years. The work begins. The next few months were the hardest I had ever worked. I visited every restaurant, met with staff at all levels, listened to their concerns, and made real changes. Nicholas was by my side every step of the way. With his tech expertise, we modernized outdated systems, making them more efficient without losing Grandpa's core values. Of course, Carol wasn't done trying to sabotage me. She spread rumors that I had stolen the company, trying to turn people against me. But the truth was easy to prove. As the restaurants began to thrive, her credibility vanished. Mom and Dad took longer to come around. At first, they watched from a distance, unsure. But they couldn't ignore the rising profits or the improving employee satisfaction scores. Dad, despite everything, still worked for the company. And now, for the first time, he worked for me. The real turning point. I never fired my father. Despite everything, I knew one thing for sure. When he focused on operations instead of status and image, he was good at what he did. And no matter what had happened between us, the business came first. But the real shift, the moment everything truly changed, came 5 months later. I was working the dinner shift at Grandpa's original diner, the very first restaurant he had ever built. It was something I did often. Staying connected to our roots wasn't just symbolic, it was necessary. That night, as I wiped down a counter, I saw them walk in. My parents. They hesitated at the entrance before making their way to their usual booth. For the first time in my life, they looked unsure, even nervous. I grabbed 2 menus and walked over, standing tall. "Welcome to Eric's," I said, keeping my voice professional. Today's special is Grandpa's famous meatloaf. Mom opened her mouth like she wanted to say something, but then she stopped. Instead, her eyes drifted around the restaurant. Every table was full. The hum of conversation filled the air. The kitchen staff moved efficiently, their faces genuinely happy. The servers greeted customers with warmth. There was a buzz of satisfaction, the kind of energy you can't fake. Mom let out a slow breath. The place looks good. I met her eyes. It is good, I said simply. All of our locations are. Profits are up 30% from last year. Staff turnover is the lowest it's ever been. And we're opening 3 new restaurants next month. Dad cleared his throat. His usual confidence was gone. For a long moment, he just looked at me. Then, finally, in a voice that was quieter than I had ever heard from him, he said, "We were wrong." I felt Nicholas's gaze on me from across the diner, but I kept my focus on my father.
About you.
About everything. He exhaled, shaking his head slightly. Your grandfather, he knew exactly what he was doing. A familiar weight pressed against my pocket, the weight of a small, worn set of keys. The same keys Grandpa had handed me when I was just 15 years old, standing in this very diner, ready for my first shift as a dishwasher. Success isn't about looking important, I said softly, my fingers brushing against the keys. It's about being important to your people. Mom swallowed hard. She glanced at Dad, then back at me. And Carol, she asked hesitantly. I didn't hesitate. She's welcome to apply for an entry-level position. I met her gaze evenly. Same as anyone else. If she wants to be part of this, she'll have to earn it. Mom nodded slowly, the realization settling in. This wasn't just my company now. It was my rules. I took their orders and left them alone to process everything. How the daughter they had dismissed, the simple girl they had underestimated, had completely transformed their world. Full circle. Later that night, after we closed, I found myself in Grandpa's old office.
My office now.
The room still smelled of coffee and paper, like it always had. The walls were lined with old photos, memories of where this company had started. My gaze landed on a framed letter hanging next to Grandpa's picture. The letter he had left me on my wedding day. The letter that had changed everything. Nicholas walked in, carrying 3 cups of coffee, and handed one to me. Then, like he had every night since this journey began, he sat beside me. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked. I smiled, tracing my finger along the frame of Grandpa's photo. Just thinking about how sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. I exhaled, my heart full. It's about proving them wrong, by being exactly who you always were. Nicholas chuckled softly. And who is that? I turned to him, already knowing the answer. The girl who loved this business enough to start as a dishwasher. The woman who knows every employee's name. The CEO who still works the dinner shift. I stood up, gathering my things. Come on, let's go home, I said to Nicholas with a smile. We're hosting the employee scholarship dinner tomorrow, and I want to make Grandpa's famous apple pie for it. Nicholas chuckled. You baking? This I have to see. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. As we walked out, I paused in front of the old wooden sign hanging in the diner's lobby, the very first one Grandpa had put up when he opened this place. Megan Mullally Neighborhood Grill, where everyone is family. For so long, those words had felt like just a saying, something nice to tell customers.
But now?
Now they were finally true. An unexpected visitor. The next morning, I arrived at the restaurant early, ready to prepare for the big event. But as I stepped into the lobby, I stopped in my tracks. Carol was there. She sat on one of the chairs, holding a piece of paper in her hands. She looked different. Her usual designer clothes were gone. There was no expensive jewelry, no flawless makeup. Instead, she wore simple jeans and a sweater. Her hair, usually styled perfectly, was tied back in a low ponytail. She looked nervous. When she saw me, she stood up and held out the paper. A job application. I'd like to apply for a server position, she said softly. If that's okay. I looked at my sister, and, for the first time, I saw something I had never seen before. Humility. I took the application from her hands, meeting her eyes. Training starts Friday at 6 a.m., I said. Don't be late. She nodded. I won't. The truth about family. As I watched her walk away, I realized something. Sometimes, family has to fall apart completely before it can be rebuilt into something stronger. And sometimes, the person everyone called simple turns out to be the only one strong enough to put it all back together. Grandpa had known that all along. And now, so did everyone else.